Okay, so in this explainer, we're going to peel back the layers of our cities. We're going to look at how they go from just a blueprint, a drawing on a page, to the living, breathing places we walk through every single day. And, more importantly, we're going to dig into the evolving role you play in that whole process. I mean, just think about it for a second. Have you ever wondered who decides where the park benches go? Like, the exact spot? Or how wide a sidewalk should be? Or why that new building is suddenly popping up on your corner? It's easy to think, right, that these decisions are just made in some far-off office by people you'll never ever meet.
Well, the thing is, that's really starting to change. More and more, the design of our cities is becoming a conversation. It's becoming a partnership between the experts and, well, us, the residents. So let's break down what that partnership actually looks like. How do we even measure real influence?
All right, so to really get a handle on this shift, we first need a way to measure it, right? I mean, how do we even begin to categorize the power of a citizen's voice in the grand scheme of designing a whole city? So the classic model for this is something called Arnstein's Ladder of Citizen Participation. It's a pretty brilliant framework, actually. It pictures public involvement as rungs on a ladder. Down at the bottom, you've got the lowest rungs, which basically mean you're not participating at all. But as you climb higher, you get to the rungs that represent genuine, real-deal citizen power. Okay, so what does it actually look like to climb this ladder? Let's break down the different levels, the ones where your voice starts to have a real impact. So at the bottom, we start with information. That's basically the city just telling you what's happening, like a notice in the paper, simple one-way street. One step up from that is consultation. This is where they officially ask for your objections and suggestions. Then we climb higher to collaboration, and this is a big one. This is where planners are actively working with community groups on local plans. And then at the very top, the peak of the ladder, you've got empowerment. That's where residents themselves are the ones taking charge of local projects. Now, this is where it gets really interesting, because there's a crucial distinction here. Those lower levels we just talked about, being informed or consulted, they can sometimes be what's called tokenism, and that's just a fancy word for making it look like you're being included. You get to speak, sure, but you have no real power to make sure anyone actually listens or acts on it. The goal, the real win, is to get to the right side of the slide, real power. And that only happens with true collaboration and citizen-led empowerment. And you know what? Today, climbing that ladder is getting a massive, massive boost from technology. Our ability to participate isn't just limited to showing up at a stuffy town hall meeting anymore, not by a long shot. I mean, just look at the digital toolkit we have now. We've got online portals that create these real-time feedback loops so you can actually track what happens to your suggestions. Then there are crowdsourcing platforms where governments are running competitions, literally letting you design your own local park. And then there's something that sounds like it's straight out of a sci-fi movie, digital twins. So what on earth is a digital twin? Okay, imagine this. It's a fully interactive, virtual 3D model of a city or a park or a new building. And it's not just some static drawing. No way. It's a dynamic simulation. It lets you virtually walk through a proposed park or see exactly how a new high-rise is going to cast shadows on your street, all before a single brick has even been laid. It's incredible. And this is where the true power of this tech really clicks. It takes something abstract, like a blueprint, and makes it completely tangible. You can actually feel the impact of, say, a new flyover on your neighborhood, all from your phone or your computer. And that gives you the power to provide super specific, really informed feedback. But here's the thing. Our influence isn't just about what we say out loud, in meetings or online. We also shape our cities every single day just by living in them. Our behavior, it's its own kind of feedback, silent but incredibly powerful. You've totally seen this before, right? In a park, maybe on a college campus, there's the beautifully paved official path the architect designed, and then there's that little dirt track cutting across the grass that everyone actually uses. Yeah, those have a name. They're called desire lines. And they're basically the footprints of our collective wisdom, showing the most efficient, common-sense route from point A to B. And this has led smart planners to completely change their approach. They've stopped fighting them. Instead, the new philosophy is observe, then pave. Just wait, see where people naturally walk, and then build the sidewalk right there. So simple, right? And the same idea of just observing human behavior, it applies to one of the most important things in any city, safety. So on the one hand, you've got the traditional approach, right? Fences, gates, security guards.
But on the other hand, you have a much more organic and honestly a far more powerful concept. It was championed by the absolute legend Jane Jacobs, and it's called eyes on the street.
So eyes on the street is just that natural surveillance you get from shopkeepers looking out their windows or neighbors sitting on their porches. It creates this feeling of psychological safety. See, for a lot of people, especially women and children, that feeling of being safe doesn't come from a high wall. It comes from good lighting, being able to see what's around you, and just the comforting presence of other people. Okay, so we've talked about giving input before something gets built, but what about after? How do we know if a project actually worked? This brings us to the final and maybe the most important stage of all this, the reality check. This is something called a post-occupancy evaluation, or POE for short, and you can think of it like a report card for the whole project. It's a formal process where planners go back and see how well the space is actually working for the people who use it every single day. It's really the ultimate tool for accountability and for learning what to do better next time. And this isn't just some vague idea either. It's becoming standard practice, with a really clear timeline. The evaluation is typically done about 6 months after people move in. Why 6 months? Well, that's enough time for the novelty to wear off, and for real, everyday patterns to start showing up. And what these evaluations often reveal is something called a behavioral mismatch. This right here is a perfect classic example. The designer intended to create a beautiful green space for recreation. Awesome idea, right? But what did the residents actually use it for? Overflow car parking. The lesson here is crystal clear. The design, as good as it looks on paper, failed. It failed because it completely underestimated a really fundamental need of the people living there. Which really brings us right back to our central idea. This whole process, everything from the digital feedback and the desire lines, all the way to these post-occupancy evaluations, it all proves one thing. Great cities aren't static objects. They're not just built and then done. They're more like living organisms, constantly being co-authored in this ongoing conversation between the planners and the people. So, I'll leave you with this. The next time you walk through your own neighborhood, I want you to look at it differently. Really look. Look for the desire lines. Think about the eyes on the street. Ask yourself, what story is my community telling? What's the difference between how it was designed and how it's actually lived? And more importantly, what part will you write in its next chapter?